Hi, and welcome to a special holiday edition of Venture Underground. You can tell because we're wearing Christmas sweaters. It'd be hilarious if we were actually just doing this in July, but put on sweaters, which is really the only way you know in California it's Christmassy since we don't have snow on the ground. I am Sarah Lacey. I am here with Deo Ressi, and we are going to talk about holiday fundraising. You may be thinking, holiday fundraising? No one fundraises in the holidays. Au contraire. Adeo, talk to us about this week's big old misconception that holiday fundraising isn't a thing.
Almost all VCs believe incorrectly that starting around the last 2 weeks in December, fundraising stops. And in my experience, that's not true. And then they also believe, which is wrong as well, that in the first week of January, things start to pick up. And that's just not true. In my experience as a manager, and in my experience working with about 1,000 venture funds that we've helped to launch, we see people actually close on capital, launch venture capital funds all the way up until the 1st of January. Then what happens is the first 3 weeks of January are dead. And somewhere around January 17th to 20th, you start seeing life breathe back in the market. And I can come up with a bunch of theories as to why that's the case, but that's the data that we see over and over again, year after year, consistently.
For a moment, indulge me. What are the theories? Because so I see something like this, like in the publishing world, where there's always this idea of because publishing, even more than venture capital, like those people take more vacations than you can imagine. Like they are gone in August, they are gone once you hit, middle of December. But if you're gonna like send a book proposal out, there's always this idea of, well, maybe I should be the one to send it at the holidays because no one else is sending it, and I'll be the only one reading it. So when you first told me this, I thought, well, maybe the reason you fundraise in the holidays is because no one else is. And so it's not as competitive. And then when you come back in January, everyone else is. And so it's more competitive. But it sounds like that's not even what you're talking about. There's just no deals happening in January. So what are VCs doing when they get back in January?
A lot of people, as it gets towards the end of the year, do have this FOMO year end, get it done mindset. LPs are like, hey, I got this money. I wanted to invest it this year. I want to get it out the door this year. So everybody has that year end time pressure. It's super effective. You absolutely should use it as a GP. It is a real issue for LPs as well. And then, candidly, I think a lot of people take a week or two of holiday going into January, and then they need a week or two to get back on track to whatever they're doing. It's like, you make New Year's resolutions. You have tons of emails that come in while you've been out of office. You want to start the new year on a new foot and with a new mindset. And so you're not like jumping back into where you left things off right at the end of the year. And when we measure this quantifiably, it turns out that that ends up being about the third week of January when people start coming back mentally into what's going on. So that would be roughly the 19th of January in 2026 is when you're going to see a real uptick in activity. Now, that doesn't mean that if you text someone how you're doing on the 1st of January and they're like, "Oh, happy New Year." They're not gonna reply. Of course, they're gonna reply, but it's just like that mindset of signing things, of doing things, of getting things done. And it could also be one of the other theories is like you push to get so much stuff done at the end of 20 of whatever the year is, 2025, whatever, that you're like, I got it all done. I don't need to do anything now for a few weeks. I just got back from holiday. I don't want to be bothered.
Does it work so that LPs think in calendar cycles, like someone who's deploying like a media budget or a certain budget? Like I know whenever you're trying to sell, it's often a good at the end of the year because you're like, okay, there's some remaining budget. I can go around soaking up this remaining budget. Whereas at the beginning, it's like, well, now I'm planning for a whole year. I don't know. I've got to really think about it. It's the beginning of the year and it's 12 months out. Am I really going to invest in you? Because what might be coming later on? I mean, is part of it this idea of if I'm thinking I'm going to invest in 5 funds a year, I'm not going to necessarily sign up for the first one that comes in. Or are they thinking more long term than that?
I think it's a little bit of both. If you're a individual, like a angel, high net worth individual, executive, exited founder, etc., you don't necessarily think in yearly allocations, but you do think that, hey, I did make a commitment to do this year and I'm planning to get it done this year. And some people do tax plan in that bracket. So they're like, hey, I want to make this investment because maybe it's a rollover or they're doing it for some tax strategy. But as a whole, with the individual investors, it's more like I made a commitment to do it this year. I want to get it done this year. Back to then larger institutionals, maybe family offices, larger family offices, corporations, etc. They absolutely work on budgets. And in fact, it's possible if you miss this year, you don't get it next year. Now, they're aware of that from their point of view. Let's say you're a corporation, you have a budget to make investments, you're planning to get an investment done in 2025. If it doesn't get done, that's money unused. And a lot of times, if you don't use money, you don't get it the following year. So they have a lot of pressure to get these things done by year end. But there's another year end dynamic that's just worth quickly mentioning for those types that's really important. I have a lot of people tell me, I'm going to close in Q1. And I'm like, oh, great. How are you talking with the LPs? I'm talking with the LPs. Have you gone to their investment committee? No, I haven't been their investment committee. If you're not on the radar in Q4 for close, there's no way with these larger LPs you're going to close in Q1. So for many GPs right now that want to close in either Q1 or Q2 of the coming year, it's mission critical that they get on the radar of those LPs and make sure they're slated. Because as you were saying, a lot of these larger LPs are investing on budgets that are planned year or years, certainly months in advance. And if you're not on the radar, you may not make it all of next year, forget Q1 or Q2.
It's so interesting that it's not just if you don't know that these deals are getting done end of December and not getting done in the beginning of January could totally derail your momentum, but it's also a competitive advantage if you know this because it's so counterintuitive. All right, so knowing this fact and having potentially this competitive advantage, what should you be doing now? Because it is hard to get people's attention at the holidays. People are going to be wearing these sweaters, going to parties, they're gonna be doing all these things with their families. So, is it a different playbook when you're trying to get people's attention at the holidays?
Let's say roughly there's 6,000 firms that are actually operating in the world today, give or take, somewhere between 4 and 8. So I average it to 6. And I would be willing to tell you that over 5,000 of the 6,000 firms sit out the holidays. Like in at probably by the end of this week, which is about 3 weeks before the end of the year, pretty much every 5,000 some odd firms that should be hustling are kind of winding down their hustle and planning to pick it up in early January, which means that because you're watching this and you've heard what to do right, you've got to go into overdrive. So, first and foremost, look at everybody on your list and just check in with them. If you haven't spoken to them in a little bit or you're engaging with them, hey, we're looking to make some progress by the end of the year. Love to hear if it's something you're interested in. So give them a deadline that you want to try and get this something done by the end of the year and see if they engage. Now, what's going to happen is that a whole bunch of people will reply and say, yeah, that sounds interesting. Let me know. If you were to reach out to a hypothetical 100 people, in my experience, something like 20 or 25 people of those that you've been talking to and engaging will say, yeah, let's see if we can get something done by the end of the year. And that's great. Like, there you go. Target list. Now you know they're interested in your timing. You got the deadline by the end of the year. That's where you focus your time and energy. And then what you need to do is say, okay, you don't want to plan to close on December 31st. That's cruel for you and cruel for everyone. So you want to pick a day, roughly a week before. So you say, hey, we're going to try and get everything done by December 25th. I'd love to send you over some materials. Maybe we can jump on a call like this. Then we're going to have a holiday party like this. So you kind of want to map out how you're going to get to from where you are to a closing before the very last day of the year. Now, in my experience, Sarah, stuff always slips. That's why you want to give yourself roughly a week of time so that you plan a strategy, you plan what you're going to do, a holiday party, a news update, a call, sending the materials, and then all best laid plans go to hell when they actually hit the real world. So you want to have that budget of extra time so it slips. But as it starts to slip and get close to the new year, that actually really does create pressure for both sides. And I can tell you from lots of experience, you're going to have pressure to get it done by the end of the year. They're going to have pressure to get it done by the end of the year. You can use that pressure. And that's why, as I said, December 31st, lots of deals will get done.
Why is there pressure? Is it just human psychology that somehow this year and the calendar turning feels so different, we have to get it done? Or is there a good reason to push? I mean, is it, I guess what I'm asking is this just a psychological thing that GPs can use to their advantage to create momentum and scarcity and finally get people off the fence? Or is there a real reason if you start this, it has to close on the 31st?
A little bit of both. Right? For some investors, there is a real reason, as we said before. For many LPs, there are real reasons. For many GPs, there are real reasons. You want to be in a vintage year. You want to get this done going into the new year. It's great to get things done and take some time off and celebrate. So, the end of the year is the single best forcing function that you have as a GP and LP to get stuff done, full stop. So, it should be used. Now, look, there's another dark side to that. I told you a story as we were prepping for this podcast about the fund that had 9 million in commitments. They waited to the new year. They got hit with Chinese New Year because they're in Asia, so they waited a little extra, and Chinese New Year falls slightly differently. So I believe they waited to the end of February, early March. It's like not that long, maybe 2 months max, and they got closed on 0. So they went from 9 million in signed commitments to 0, and it was this holiday reset that caused it.
So what happened? People just moved on? Or was it a matter of if you're not hustling enough to close this or other people hustled and got those funds?
We see it so often, it's a fact, but it's like causation versus correlation. So it's a
Yeah.
correlated fact that the jump of the new year, it basically can decimate your verbal and written commitments. And so, really, as a manager, your job in this holiday period is to think about how do I stay top of mind with all of my soft circled commitments through this holiday period so that I can count on them closing in February, March, or whenever. So you must do high touch point. We call them mid funnel activities. So let's just cover some stuff. If you have someone who's made $1 million commitment to your fund, you can send them a holiday gift, right? Like, well, I wouldn't even say can, you should send them a holiday gift. Send them like whatever, pretzels. Like,
Maybe wine, maybe a nice bottle of wine if it was $1,000,000.
yeah. What and now, oh wow, Adeo sent me this really great gift. That's so sweet. I'm really excited to pick up where we left off in the new year. Just saying like happy new year. Hope you're having a great time in Barbados, on your boat, in your mansion, skiing in the Alps, whatever obviously knowing what they're up to, checking in with them individually as well. So now you've done a newsletter, a gift, an individual check-in. There's lots of other things you could do, events like, "Hey, we're having a little holiday party." I don't know if you're around. Now, little secret is you can have holiday parties before the new year, and you can have holiday parties after the new year. So, there are lots of event ways that you can engage them, but the main thing that I would say is in this mission critical reset period, which is gonna be the 2 weeks before the new year and the 3 weeks after the new year. So call that 5 to 6 weeks time. You should have at least a check-in 3 times, which would be once every 2 weeks and possibly once a week with those critical commitments. You can have some generic check-ins like a newsletter, but you have to have some personalized check-ins as well. If you do not do that, you can assume that you're gonna lose about half of your commitments, possibly more.
It strikes me the other thing that you can do, and I think we talked about this earlier when we were talking about this episode, is report back on what you said you were going to do in 2025. I mean, the other big psychological, magical thing that happens when we go from Wednesday the 31st to, you know, Thursday the 1st, all that happens is the sun comes down and goes up, but suddenly we're in a whole new calendar year and all those things we were supposed to accomplish in 2025, like the piper has to be paid. And so, also, I think, in talking to so many LPs and doing so many case studies, the people who want to talk to you at the beginning and they're like, little early for me, check back. That they want to know, did you do all the things you said you were going to do? So it seems to me it's also a really good excuse to check in with people and be like, look, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this.
To your point, this is a great time to write like a year in review. In fact, so 2 of the 3 to 5 things you wanna send LPs, one of them could be like, "Hey, here's our reflections on 2025 in this case, and here are what we're planning for 2026." And those can actually be separate, correspondences. In fact, I do both. I write about in one hand what I think happened in 2025, and I always like to open the new year with what I think we expect to happen in the new year and where we think things are going. Those are fantastic updates to read, fantastic updates to receive, and get people really excited.
Right. Last thing I want to cover is in your own holiday season that you're going to as a GP. I mean, if you are going to holiday parties, certainly in the Bay Area, if you are going home, let's say to Connecticut or some other much bougier place, if you have people in your networks who are the people who could be your LPs, if you're about to go to a bunch of Bay Area, New York, LA holiday parties, how do you use your own holiday season to even start getting new leads? Because friends and family, if you're a brand new GP, that's where you're going to start getting your first closes. So, there's always people who are going to be like, oh, I feel awkward, but like, come on. If you're a new GP, you got to always be pitching this thing. So, what's your advice for being at a holiday party and not so subtly feeling people out, letting them know what you're doing, while also, being mindful of general solicitation and the rules of, polite conversation.
The general rule of thumb that I would say is that if you're working on a fund, everyone in your extended circle should know. It's not a bad thing. I think a lot of people are afraid to ask for money. They're afraid to ask for money from people they know. They're sometimes even afraid to talk about what they're doing because it might imply like they're asking for money. So they're just super sensitive about all this. And like that's not how this gets done. You need to tell everyone and anyone that you have a connection to about what you're working on and offer them the ability to both give you feedback, make introductions, and possibly invest if it's something that they feel right about. And let me just cover this for 1 second, Sarah, because this is an important point. You may mess up and do very badly. Okay. That's possible. But right now, there's not a lot of better stuff to invest in than startups. You're actually investing in companies that might change the world and become unicorns and make people 1,000x. which then turns into 20 to 30x for them. So, it's not a bad thing. And I think there's this feeling a lot of times, and it's irrational, that maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe investing in startups isn't the right thing. It's like that's just a load.
Well, and also you shouldn't be doing this then. I mean, this is always the thing about like sales. It's like it doesn't feel like sales if you believe in what you're selling, right? And it's like my other thing is, I had a very southern mother who always told me. I remember once I was a real slob when I was a kid, and she was like, "What are you going to do when you're a grown up? And I'm not here to pick up after you." And I said the most obnoxious thing possible. I said, "I'll hire someone." And she said, "You should never ask someone else to do anything that you have not done yourself." And I think of this it's the same with fund managers. If they are gonna be expecting entrepreneurs to do this, they should be willing to do it themselves. And I think that's the reason a lot of entrepreneurs do not like VCs who have not been operators and do not like VCs who have not been entrepreneurs. They've not been in their shoes. They have not had to hustle. They have not had to pick up every rock and try to find money under it. They have not had to lay people off. They have not stared down the barrel of a payroll that they don't think they can meet. And this is why these scrappy new emerging managers are the kind of people that entrepreneurs want on their cap table. And if you're going to expect an entrepreneur to be going to everyone they know and constantly be fundraising and constantly be hustling and be, up until December 31st asking for money, you need to be doing it too. Why do you expect one of your investments to do it if you're not going to do it?
I mean, that's also true. And the reality is, most investors will pitch more people than entrepreneurs pitch. It could take you 250 to 300 pitches to close a fund. And I've never really seen an entrepreneur in an individual round pitch 250 to 300 people. I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but I've never seen it. You can usually get it done with 100 or less, maybe 200. So the low end of venture is the high end of entrepreneurship in terms of pitching. But look, I mean, the reality is that it's very different to pitch like this corporation or endowment than it is to pitch like a friend and family. But that's why you also don't pitch them the same way. You generally just tell them what you're up to and ask them for feedback, and they'll indicate to you if it's something that they're interested in. So you're not really pitching, you're just telling them what you're doing. But I think people get so afraid of asking them for money that they don't even tell them really what they're doing in such a way that that person could express interest to invest. They're like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm working on a new idea." It's like, "Well, what? Like what? Like, tell me more." Like, you should just be like, "I'm working on a fund, planning to close it next year. We're gonna invest in these companies that we expect to be unicorns." And they're like, "Oh, that's great." Like that, thank you. Or if they're like, "Wow, that's very interesting. I'd like to learn more," flow with it. The other thing that you brought up that I think is important to double click on, there are tons of holiday parties. You've got to be out and about. Sitting home alone in the holidays is what I'm going to do because I'm not fundraising. But if you are fundraising, you've got to be out and about as many of events, try and get as many holiday parties as you can. Talk to people. What holiday parties are you going to? Oh, you're going to this. I'd love to go to that one. Can you score me an invite? Or can I be your plus one? So you got to hustle.
All right. Well, now that you've given us our indispensable holiday guide, we should wrap this up so that people can go, whatever they need to do, meditate, drink a Jolt Cola, do whatever they need to do to go get into their holiday sprint.
Holiday closing sprint. Exactly. If I were to say something that you could do right away, give you an actionable piece of advice, close this podcast, go to your CRM system or whatever with the people that you're thinking of having come into your fund, and actually reach out to everyone to find the 20 to 25% that want to close before the end of the year. Good luck.